science of turning fiction into fact.
Sometimes kind of real architectural life interferes with intellectual architectural life.
There is no such thing as architecture.
Hello everyone, this is Vikram Prakash and you are listening yet once again to Architecture Talk. Each episode we try and have a conversation with a contemporary thinker to advance the frontier of architectural thinking. But also, if the truth be told, a lot of these conversations are me trying to interrogate, have fun, hang out with my friends, new friends, people I'm trying to make friends with the idea of sharing ideas and cultivating relationships. That's certainly what's going on today as I speak to Franz Ziegler, architect and urban planner who lives for the most in Rotterdam, but also in Maastricht, both in Holland. And as you will see from the conversation, Franz and I go back a very long time. You will hear our history and you will hear the story of Holland, India, and global architecture. Here we go. I hope you enjoy it. And as we say here in the United States, happy Thanksgiving.
So Franz, so you have been practicing in Holland for how long now?
I have been in practice for almost 30 years now. My own practice since 18 years. 2002 I started.
2002 you started. And now one of the problems with Holland is that every street corner has an architect and an urban designer. Yes? You know, what is the story with you guys in Holland? You know, what's going on? How come you have so many excellent architects? I don't know. Tell me the truth. What's the real reason how this happens?
Just to nuance it, Italy has more architects than Netherlands, but you know that Dutch are tradespeople. You know, we've been selling stuff all around the world for centuries, and we're just really great in selling our architecture. So you have the impression that we have so many good architects, but they're just good tradesmen.
Good salesmen.
Salesmen, yes, that's it. And very good in media, and I'm surprised you haven't had more Dutch architects in your show.
I know. But proportionately speaking, I probably have had quite a few. So, but I'm just thinking about salesmen, and so that's one of the reasons that perhaps you like going to India, because that's also a country of salesmen, no?
Excellent question. Of course, I knew the question was going to come. Why did I go to India? But for me, it was absolutely not something about trying to get into the market there or trying to do some architecture there. It was purely interest in the country, and I had some intuition that I was going to meet some good people there.
Just an intuition? You were walking down the street and you had this intuition? There must be something that drew you.
Seriously, knew very, very little about India. I have to tell you that my father is an urbanist planner as well, and traveled around the world as a consultant, working for a big consultancy company in the Netherlands. And since 70s, he's gone around the world, but he hadn't been to India. So that was one of the choices that I made. I have to go somewhere where he didn't go. You know, I was in Egypt as a child. That was 78, 79. I was 10, 11 years old. And I think that made a really lasting impression on my young years. And it really drew me into a sort of traveling spirit.
So this is one of the great advantages you guys have in Holland, as like the English and the French, is that you had a colonial empire. And I remember, of course, REM also started in Indonesia somewhere, didn't he?
He was born in Indonesia.
Yes.
Yes.
And that perspective, I think does something. It lodges something in your brain, and then you just can't. You have to find out what it is. Maybe that's why. Because I mean, this is what I remember about you is 1990
That's right.
Context and Modernity Conference at TU Delft. And Franz Ziegler and Marcel Musch were the co-organizers, and I was a young graduate student at Cornell, and I went to that conference, and that's when I met you.
That's right.
And I think it was 1 year later, I was in Ahmedabad, and I was trying to finish my PhD there and teaching at CEPT, at the Center for Environmental Planning and Technology, and there you were.
That's right. That's right. That's also coincidental.
And what were you doing in India then?
Well, in that conference we are talking about, Context and Modernity, that was set up by a large, very enthusiastic student group, a lot of my friends. We got together. There was originally an idea by Alexander Tsonis, one of our professors, and he basically asked if we would like to organize a conference on critical regionalism. And he had proposed quite a number of guests to come to this seminar. And one of them was B.V. Doshi, Balkrishna Doshi. So it so happened that we started talking during the conference, and I was really drawn to his perspectives, and it all seemed very attractive to start a conversation, which led to an exchange. And 2 years later, myself went for the first exchange between Delft and University of Delft and CEPT Ahmedabad. And that's how we met for the second time, which was so coincidental.
Those were such good times. Those were such good times.
Very good.
And what did you learn about architecture from India?
Oh, I learned so many things. Where to start? I was studying in Delft in a great place, but it was quite a huge university. A lot of different researches, a lot of directions, and we were trying to find a course. It was an interesting time because Delft was very informed by the Team 10 group. That is, Herzberger, Van Eyck had dominated the school for many years. But Rem Koolhaas was just entering, actually quite some years, but it really became a sort of polemic at the time, in which different discussions and courses happened. And then when I went to India, I came to a great school, but it was very small, and it seemed to be a very strong community of teachers who were having their own debate, but it was much closer together. The community was very small, and I think of the Team 10 ideas and the discussions that came out of that, I got a much deeper sense in India. And I realized that many of those ideas and those discussions also came from India.
So you're saying India is the manifestation of the ideals of Team 10?
Well, you know that Herzberger and Van Eyck and the whole structuralist group from Netherlands, they were oriented towards Africa, and they had a lot of stories.
That's an amazing line of argument. I had never thought about that. I mean, it's true that they were oriented to that. They had all those stories, and And the idea of a habitat which has this high degree of urban, spatial, cultural complexity, as different from the sort of clear patterns and ideals of modernism, must have been a significant reference point for that sort of structuralist viewpoint, no?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the whole architectural idiom also suits and in a much more natural way in India.
Because I remember, somehow I ended up teaching that studio that you were doing, although we were basically peers. So,
Yes.
and I remember it was the thesis studio, and I was co-teaching with Chaya.
Yes.
And you were in that studio, and we were talking about this and we were talking about that, and I was trying to bring in the latest deconstruction and sort of all these kind of ideas into that studio, and I was trying to sell this complex thinking and all that kind of stuff. And I was so sure, and there was this space in the old city. We were looking at the structure of the old city, its morphology, and so on. And there was this space in the between, and we came to you, and you had done nothing. And and I remember very distinctly, and you were talking about this space of this street and how it creates this residual space over here, and how this angle moves around, and this, that, da, 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 da. And so then I remember asking you, so why didn't you do anything? You said, I don't need to do anything. It's perfect already.
Yes, this is a fantastic memory, Vikram, because it was a very important project for me, doing nothing, but analyzing the situation and really seriously looking at the spaces and understanding it. Yeah, it was strange because I'd done all these projects in Delft, and this is exactly what I mean, is that it was an analytical project for me. I happened to land up in the conservative group, like conserving, and it seemed great fun to me, like not doing something new, but conserving, restoring, looking at the spaces and presenting as a piece of city which had organically grew as a design, selling it.
Yes.
There's the salesman.
Yes, that's right. That's a mind-blowing event. I just couldn't believe it because I was so sure that this cool Dutch architect is going to make a gem of a modernist je ne sais quoi, with like this and this and this and this and this. And he said, no need to do anything. It's perfect.
I was just listening to the interview you did with Neil Kanchaya, and it was as if 25 years just flew by, and the discussions kept going on. It was a great interview, and he still has this spirit of cooperative design. It's not like something one student does, but they're passing it on. And this was a very consequent way of teaching. I think he's still doing it.
I mean, it's very nostalgic, particularly nowadays when I ran studio this morning on Zoom. And the contrast between what it is to run a studio on Zoom and what we were doing there in Sept in the early 90s, small school, intense, everything on paper, studios were full, people would sleep under their desks. Crits would go on for hours and hours, and then we would sit under the trees and drink chai and talk about this and that. And there was KK, and there was Shumitra, and there was Nisha, and then there was Anand Bhatt, and then there was Chaya and Varki. It was, now looking back, and Bobby Desai in between, and it was quite a different architectural ethos, wasn't it?
Yes and no. I mean, as you're talking, I'm remembering it. Maybe I turned conservative, but I still cherish doing hand drawings and having those discussions. And I like to think that many things have changed, and you can emphasize that. But I like continuity, and so many things seem to regain value. Like I just got a new iPad where you can actually draw on the screen. One of your techniques that you have done so beautifully earlier on, drawing on the screen. And I still have resistance to it because I like to, draw on a piece of paper and feel the fabric of a paper and make a photograph. And, it still has this magic of handmade stuff. It's still there and it still works.
Yeah. And you and Fritz Palmboom, whom I also interviewed in this podcast earlier, are the kings of the line drawing, man. You guys make such amazing line drawings. I am so in awe of your ability to make that drawing and say so much with so little. Marketing. Now I know it's all marketing.
I will admit that, Vikram. I will admit it because while thinking about what we would talk about in this interview, I was thinking, you're interviewing me, but I'm much more comfortable interviewing you. One of the techniques that we use when we have a new client, we don't try to impress them with, beautiful renderings, images of what they could be building. But basically, I like to interview and see what they have to say. And of course, many architects do this, but you can take this a little bit further by not only recording what they are answering, but drawing it out. So analyzing what is being said in combination with the location, the site, the place, and what feelings they have, and even bring out historical photographs and starting to trace the history and telling them, okay, I can see this, do you see this also? And actually drawing them into a situation in which they feel they're designing.
Yeah. And you're talking about drawing live while you're
and
talking.
drawing live or bringing drawings, which are basically traces and reductions of stuff that they have brought in. So it's like an intense dialogue in that way, in which for them, and maybe, of course, the skill is with me or with us when we draw, but it's the feeling that you're designing together. We don't need an Apple iPad for that.
Yeah, maybe not. So what is it about the pen on paper? What is it? Why? What does that do? Describe the emotion to me when you're doing that. What do you feel? Does your heartbeat go up? Does your hand tremble?
To make a drawing still, I have a resistance or I have a little doubt, but when I put the pen on the paper, you can actually get into a flow. The flow which we use so often now, this exciting moment when things start to go and you get inspired or whatever. But the flow is quite literal, that you trace and things happen by itself. And as Fritz Palmboom has already probably remarked to you, it's a skill which is at some point inherent, where you don't think, but it happens. Richard Sennett talks about it in his Craftsman, is that if you draw a lot, there are things that happen automatically.
Yeah. The drawing draws itself. So many times I hear this. Drawing draws itself, the music writes itself, the sentence composes itself.
And that's a happy moment when you see that happen.
Yeah, things just happen.
not just. It's practice. over and over.
Riyaz, it's riyaz. It's the job of doing it again and again every day.
That's
You
what
remember that
riyaz means.
riyaz? That riyaz means practice.
Okay.
Everyday musicians, classical musicians in India do riyaz. So that's what it is.
That's so beautiful where Richard Sennett describes that, a skill at an average needs 10,000 hours to learn. Yeah? And for some people that takes 10 years, or some people can, if they work hard, in 3 years. But it is so many hours of work to gain into a skill.
Perspiration and inspiration, 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. There's a sort of an idea of Protestant work ethic in that too. So do you have favored pens, or does it have to be a particular type of pen and a particular type of paper, or will anything do?
I'm a bit stuck to the simple Pilot fine liner, but I love to experiment with other pens as well and see what comes out. I would like to go back to charcoal and so on, like messy
Charcoal,
stuff.
messy stuff. But you don't do messy, Franz. I know you. You don't do messy. You do the precise line.
It used to be a line which is sharp and graphic, but now I'm going back to pencil in combination with a fine line to bring a little bit of softness and more of the hand in the drawing. I noticed that that it convinces better.
Yeah. Marketing. Constantly. Now, I remember your sort of breakthrough project. You did that theater in Utrecht. No, where was it?
Rotterdam.
In Rotterdam itself, where you had this sort of shed inside a glass box. It was a stage inside a stage. It was sort of played with this whole idea of theater. But really, you're basically now an urban designer, an urban planner, urban designer, urban facilitator, right? Is this fair?
Yes. I do an architectural project a year.
One project a year, but basically, yeah.
Basically, 70% is urban planning, urban design.
Why? Why do you prefer urban design, urban planning?
I think my personality and my way of working suits very well complex problems with many stakeholders, and resulting in adapting urban situations where there are more stakeholders, more users, more people involved. And as I gained experience, I like to think about how cities work in general, but how you can.
No. It's like you're into this whole idea. It feels like urban design with so many stakeholders and so many variables. It's like a clockwork with many different interconnected moving parts.
Yes.
Like a complex Swiss watch. Is that what it is? Or is it the human relationships and the conversation and just the hanging out with people that you like?
No, seriously, that's really both. But you're working on a city which is preferably organically grown. It has a history. It has a landscape underneath. It's become an urban landscape. It's a special composition which you're going to change, which has to adapt, which is even if you don't do anything, it's going to change anyway. So to have a role in this, to give it a push, and to think of projects as processes which have phases, and to put your mind to design the phases. So basically you're designing something dynamic in opposition to architecture, which is basically finishing an object, taking a photograph, and it has a beginning and an end. In urban design, it's so fascinating that you're jumping on a train and at some point you jump off again, and it goes on.
So then let's talk about the opposite then. Because you and I have spent a lot of time in the modernist city, Chandigarh.
Right.
And that was designed by old man Corbusier on, well, it wasn't tabula rasa, but he made it into tabula rasa.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a perfect, fully planned city. So that's the opposite of the city you're describing, but we have spent a lot of great time in Chandigarh and you love going to Chandigarh. Explain that then. How does that add up?
Yeah, we can go on for hours now, of course.
We are going to go on for hours.
The great thing about Chandigarh is that it has been planned and perfectly designed, as a blueprint city. And I am very sure, and you also, I think, that Corbusier knew how it would change. So that the starting point had to be clear narrative, a clear situation, something that is finished. And yet we know that, especially later in his career, he was very aware of that things will move on after that. I recently saw a drawing he made of Venice. I think when he was doing the hospital in Venice, he was very aware that things will start changing. So one of the things we see is how the landscape, the trees, the greenery of Chandigarh has completely changed the city, has overtaken the city in a big way. So the grid is a completely different grid than it was in 1960. It's much more beautiful, we have to say.
It is.
And the market centers, which used to be designed as completely independent community centers, they've specialized. That's another thing that I found fascinating in Chandigarh. That every market has become different, has different stuff to sell. Certain markets are great hangout places, other ones you never go to. Yeah. So even in this planned city, the change and the process it has gone through is one of the things that I like about it.
So what are your views on preservation then, on preservation of Chandigarh? Do you think it should not be preserved?
No, I think certainly there are some aspects to preserve. I'm working in a couple of neighborhoods in Maastricht, city of Maastricht, who has quite interesting compositions from the 50s, community basically set up in a similar way as the sectors in Chandigarh. And a couple of these centers are going to be refurbished, remodeled, and I'm guiding the process in which the new center answers to the questions that are set out now, but are inspired and are evolved from the original design. So this is maybe not pure conservation, but it is informing the new design with what has been there. And in some cases, we actually renovate the 50s buildings as well. So it's the newest answer, but we have to get out of this polemic idea. It's either new or old. The in-between is so interesting.
Yeah. Always changing, always changing.
In architecture, the similar situation is happening in which we see now architects and restoration conservation architects working much more close together, where the buildings are reused and added on to in a way in which you can hardly see what is old and new. There's a very, very soft transition that is designed, much more subtle than we used to do old and new as two entities.
So you're very much about the sort of contextualist argument then, the sort of idea of sympathetic contextual insertions into the city. You're not about wiping things clean or making completely different objects.
Certainly. That's the mainstream now.
What do you mean?
I think context, physical or organizational, managerial, everything in Europe is very much about continuity and about evolving the context in a very gradual way in which very precisely is defined what's important, what's historically important. And these are the foundations of projects. I see very little projects which can afford to do a clean sheet situation.
But have you been back to India recently, haven't you?
Yes, I was there just before the lockdown, in February.
And what do you think about growth and development in India nowadays?
No, when I go to India, I still try very hard to see India in 1992, because that's what I long for. And I still see it.
You still see it?
I still see it. Or we create it. We sit with Riaz and friends and recreate 1992.
Yeah, I don't know. It's increasingly tough for me, man. When I go back to India, I just feel like, where am I? Why am I here? It just feels like, in some ways, I'm glad. I mean, the place has moved on. I feel released from India now. Next time I go to India, I'm going to go look at the old temples, not even go to, the old 90s. I'm going to go to the 1000 AD.
Before this interview, I was thinking I will not get myself to speak in broad terms about India, because one of the things that I learned from my travels in India that there are no generalizations about India. And I think when I read the newspapers about India, if I read respected journalists about India, I'm always critical, because I always feel that there's too much of generalization, too much big trends, and there's a lot of things written about India which you don't experience when you're there, and you feel that it's written to please the Western reader. So when I go to India, and there is always this big questions: is it like this or is it like this? Is what I'm seeing a general situation? I always find immediately the opposite very, very soon. So all the aspects of liberalization and materialism, and it's all there, and yet turn the corner and you see the opposite.
How did the CEPT campus feel now that it has been significantly transformed?
Well, we had an exhibition there.
So, yeah, congratulations.
It was a great opportunity to re-interact with CEPT and show 8 projects quite elaborately. We got 2 huge models made in Ahmedabad. So we did some work in Ahmedabad to get the models on the exhibition. They were exhibited in the new library of SEPT.
Yep.
Which is, very international style, but beautiful building by Rahul Maltra, with some beautiful spaces where our exhibition sat quite beautifully. So I had some good conversations with young students, teachers, about my work, and again, it felt a bit coming home to a place I know very well. Of course, it's changed a lot. It's become very professional, very clean, much more structured. It's a good atmosphere.
It's a good atmosphere. So let's try generalizations about Holland then. How do you think about, where your work is going, and what is this sort of emerging urban planning and urban design world in Holland, into the 21st century, Do you think that the Holland architectural milieu is doing exciting work like it used to in the 90s?
In the 90s, there was kind of clear direction. I think these were the years in when Rem Koolhaas really had a great impact and started a school of architects, which you're referring to, who were fantastic in marketing and doing conceptual work, which went around the world, the super Dutch. I would say around 2005, 2008, maybe around the economic crisis, there was a kind of backlash in the sense that there's a new generation which is much more about smaller, more detailed work that is crafted. Peter Zumthor was very important, had a big impact in the architectural world. I think this is what I was just talking about, where architects started to look for the more maker's perspective, working a lot together with restoration, with heritage, these fields.
So what is the project you are working on? What is the sort of project you're excited on nowadays that you are working on?
In the last year, we have been working on a station complex in the city of Nijmegen. It's also a building which has a long history. It was built in 1892, then bombed in the Second World, then rebuilt by a post-war architect. And after that, there have been many changes, and especially the whole urban siting was very, very complex with different modalities of traffic, and so we're restructuring this, and it's exciting because it's both a great urban challenge with routing and with immense numbers of cycles to park, and it has a lot of sustainability aspects to it, because people take trains nowadays and go on their bikes to the train station, which creates exciting but new complex composition. And at the same time, it is an architectural challenge because it involves heritage buildings, and yet it has to really transform to a new type of building.
So very much the Ziegler project ethos.
Yes, I like it a lot. It's a large complex. It's very complex matter and a lot of clients. I've got 5 clients.
5 clients. Sounds like a nightmare to me, but you love it.
Yes. I realize that's what I'm good at. The more clients, the better.
Why do you like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Chandigarh had Le Corbusier as a designer and Nehru as a client.
Mm-hmm.
And all the other clients under Nehru were not very favorable for Le Corbusier. He hated them, but he had Nehru as his, ultimate client.
Yeah.
I seem to have found ways and strategies to use the diversity of the different clients, to be an inspiration to the project. That is, if I don't agree with one client, then I can always use the opinions of the other clients, to find a way out.
Mm-hmm. So you use the diversity and the conflict to your advantage.
Absolutely. I like to think that.
But you never get caught in the crossfire?
Yeah, but then you just have to wait and let the crossfire go. Let them fight together. That there are ways in which you can underline certain and draw certain interests which you think need support, the softer kind of interest, and the harder commercial necessities. They have to be taken serious and they have to pay for the project, but you can't draw it, You can draw the spatial and the tectonic and the material side of the project. And finally, if a project like the station has a strong identity, it's not a station anywhere, but it's the station of Nijmegen. It finally has a commercial value as well. When there are difficult conflicts and it seems that the commercial aspect is overruling other aspects which I find important, it's kind of the job or the skill to turn this around and to discuss more the architectural qualities, and finally prove that the identity that the whole project gets also improves the commercial value.
Nowadays, most people will justify their projects through some kind of sustainability and ecological argument.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard you use those words at all.
Yeah, too much heritage. But sustainability is absolutely, we discuss sustainability a lot, and you can frame heritage even as sustainability, but I think biodiversity and green in the city, urban green, can add so much value, and we use that a lot to make less in stone, pave less, and bring in robust green structure right into the heart of the city.
One of the other major topics nowadays, of course, is immigration. And I know this whole question of immigration into Europe, particularly into Northern Europe, is a controversial topic. Is immigration, new migrants, are you working with any such things when you design these big urban centers? How do you is that a topic? Are they one of your clients ever?
Yeah, this gets framed into the term inclusive city, just city, which I have read a lot about. It's very interesting, but it has very, very indirect relation to design of these centers. Of course, diverse program, mixed program, no monofunctional programming is very important. I'm working with a very interesting philanthropic client who is building a school in Rotterdam South, and we are doing the urban setting for this school. They're actually fragmenting the school into like 6 smaller satellites into the neighborhood, and inviting other functions into the school and mixed use or double use of the school in the neighborhood. This is the closest that I can get into that. You know that they're testing certain things, and in their approach, monitoring their input is very much part of the whole program. So the school is testing certain new strategies in teaching and education, and they're monitoring it and bringing it back to the government.
I mean, I guess the question that I'm getting to is, in the end, with all these clients and all this sort of engaged participatory design and all this sort of conflict management, does the architecture basically look like an updated version of Team 10 modernism? Or does it start to look very different? I mean, does it look Indian in some ways, or Indonesian, or or Algerian, or does Holland still look very Holland?
This is a little bit beside my work, but I can refer to the architecture of a very good friend of mine. He's pure Dutch, but he has a Suriname wife, and he's done a project which is informed by Moroccan architecture, Le Midi, and a project informed by Suriname architecture, which he knows very well. And he's made this amazing mix of very Dutch architecture and these new cultures inside. The Suriname project is very much inhabited by immigrant Suriname
people.
The Moroccan one was so successful that it was gentrified, so it was basically middle-class Dutch people who love to live in such a project. So I don't think that architecture in a way can really sustain inclusive society.
Cannot?
In some cases it can, but in that case, it was built to reflect the Moroccan people from origin Moroccan people in Netherlands. But the image was kind of bought into by middle-class Dutch.
Which is fine. I mean, I have no problem with that. I mean, middle-class Dutch people do yoga. That's okay. It's but it's good to have yoga. No, I mean, it's good to have sort of Surinamese architecture. And I mean, I guess the way I'm taking this, the next question is, are you bringing the old city of Ahmedabad into your designs or not?
Well, I still sometimes analyze the location and then decide to do nothing. It's perfect. Prove that there is no problem. And this is sustainable, Vikram. So often we think that things have to change, and then we've really looked at the situation. We might come to a solution which is very close to what's there. Not very sexy, not for the magazines, but it's very sustainable. There's a lot of consumerism in architecture.
Yeah. Architecture is very much about consumerism. So you're the anti-consumerist architect.
I'm not going to make a broad statement like that, but consumerism is one of the things that we really have to deal with. I was just reading an article that overpopulation in the world is seen as the biggest threat, but it's not overpopulation itself. It's the addition of all the consumerists. The consuming population is the problem.
It is the problem. Industrial civilization is a problem. I mean, this whole business of overproducing goods is the problem.
The article was framing that, we are now looking at Africa because there the biggest population growth is there, but it's basically a way of, looking away and stating that the problem is in Africa, and whereas we are the problem. Our consumerism is the first problem.
You mean here we in the West consume too much, is what you're saying?
Yes.
We need to consume less.
Yes. Yes.
Downsizing our homes, making do with a lot less, reusing everything.
Yeah, but that sounds very dull. But going
No,
back
it's
to
not dull.
92, one of the
Yeah.
things that I really loved about going to India the first time was to see how people could do with much less and be happy. And I was very happy with much less. Left all my stuff as a weight in Netherlands, and I was very light-footed, traveling around and basically needing very little.
Yes.
And spending very little and having a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah.
It's like the tiny house movement. People love to, go into extremely small houses and only own 100 objects and being extremely happy with that.
Less is more. All that is true. And in the end, old man Corb also retired to his cabanon in south of France. It's like nothing. It's like a minimalist, very small place.
It's so amazing. There's so many views on that man, which can be very prophetic, ahead of time. So you can read so many things there, living in a tiny house.
But we had good times in Ahmedabad, right? I mean, you remember Acacia Apartments, and we would sit there. I had a nice plush place with lots of flowing contraband alcohol, and
your house was the center of our community. Absolutely.
Those were amazing times. So, as we come towards the end over here, what are you looking forward to? What is your heart's desire over the next decade? Or 5 years or 2 years? Besides getting married, I know you're getting married, so that's good.
I'm happy not to have any perspective and have a big surprise,
Okay, I like that. You don't make up a... Yeah, you're a Buddhist, man. You're an enlightened soul. You're saying my big plan is not to have a plan.
Fantastic.
Live in the present, be in the moment, eat less, consume less, be here now. Yes?
Agreed, 100%.
Well. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you, Franz. It's so exciting. Thank you for doing this with me.
It was great to talk to you, Vikram. Really good.
Thank you for listening to Architecture Talk. This is your producer, Amelia Jarvinen. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and if you did, please subscribe and rate us on iTunes or Spotify. We would also love to hear from you if you have any suggestions on new topics or guests. You can always reach out to us on our website, Facebook, or Instagram. Thanks again, and until next time, this is Architecture Talk.